back with Marion's story. This will be part 3. Um, just to kind of recap of where we left off before, um, Marion had just completed or just had her child, and Rich is holding the child, like any father would, and the rest of the family's coming in. Friends, loved ones, just kind of, they all want to see the baby. And when we left off, Marion was telling us where Rich was in the midst of what she now knows was a panic attack. Is that right, Marion?
Something like that.
Okay.
I was starting to see stuff. And that was the first time of seeing he was really stressed out. I didn't know what was wrong. I didn't know what was going on. And somewhere in that time frame, he had had a panic attack that was like a heart attack. We'd moved to the coast. We both started antidepressants. That made things a little better. So then he switched jobs again and we moved to Baltimore. And I was born in Baltimore, so I thought, this is cool. I get to see where I was born. And, Baltimore is a beautiful city. I love the wharf area and the bay. The countryside is gorgeous. I was born in Johns Hopkins. My parents lived in Seaford, Delaware. But we found a cool little apartment place and lived there. I realized how the antidepressants would take the edge off for me, and the anger, I could feel my anger coming off on my child. And that's not good. So I'm up to my antidepressants.
If I can ask, where was your anger coming from? From the postpartum depression?
I don't know.
Where was it?
Maybe it was just, I don't know. That is a good question. I'll have to try to figure that out.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm sorry, but anyway, the antidepressants were starting to work, right?
Yeah. And we found a charismatic Episcopal church to go to, but then Rich quit coming.
Oh.
And then there was a guy sitting next to me, and people thought he was my husband. And when I told Rich that, he started coming back to church. But we were there for about a year. We were only maybe, depending on traffic, 30 minutes to an hour away from his parents. So that was nice. So they could keep Paul sometimes. But they're older. They were older. And, we'd find poop on the walls, or a diaper was taped shut with tape. They didn't know you could just peel off the little things or whatever, little things.
Right.
And we're like, okay, Papa, you may not put the baby in the car and drive him anywhere. You have to stay home with him, because he had Rex. And I thought, well, let's move back home, do whatever it takes to stay there. My parents can help. His friends were there, my friends were there. So we got back to Athens again. The first time we got back to Athens was to have the triplets, and then we got back again with Paul. So 2 years later, I'm pregnant again. My best friend is pregnant at the same time. And Rich's best friend, Jimmy McLean, wonderful, talented, exuberant individual. Jimmy got Rich into music, and Rich got Jimmy into installing theater seating, because Jimmy was a whiz at math and stuff. And those two were peas in a pod and did everything they could together, hang out whenever possible, smoke cigars together, and pontificate life. And so Jimmy had come up there. They decided they're going to start their own business, start their own theater seating company, Rich is going to do the theater seats. Jimmy's going to install them. And they were talking to different companies and this and that. And so they came up to, he came up to Baltimore for something, for part of their planning. So we moved back to Athens to try to start this business with him. And Jimmy was going to an installation in Mississippi and had his crew in the van. Rich was going to go with them, but I don't know why he didn't go. And they were killed in a car wreck on the way, on the other side of Atlanta in Carrollton. Jimmy was killed. He was driving. Tire blew. A younger man was able to get his seatbelt on. Another man died about a week later, was in a coma. And I can't remember if there was one other or not. And Jimmy was Rich's best friend, his life. He just, he was lost after Jimmy died. And
that had to have been devastating for Rich. I mean, it's difficult enough for us to make friends in the first place, you know, and
exactly. He's the only friend he's had his whole life that Mark Turnell.
That's what I mean.
Mark was a really good friend of Rich. They worked together. And beside that, Jimmy McLean. And they were all in each other's weddings. And Rich just wasn't. He was different, I guess, after that. And talking about this and thinking about this past week and writing my notes, it occurred to me, being a grief specialist, I know I need to do my work on Jimmy McLean. I need to do my work on Straight, which this is part of.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because there's layers. You got to peel them off one by one. Onion, artichoke, bricks, whatever it is, that sack of rocks you're getting off of you. One by one subject at a time. Because they're cumulatively negative and negatively cumulative on you. And you got to take one at a time and work them. And boy, and I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to go into straight stuff. I'm like, it's not a part of my life. It's not who I am. It's not me. That part of my life is over. And when you approached me, God said, no, it's not. It is a part of your life. I said, yeah, you're right. It is, damn it. It's a sad shame. But it is.
Yeah, it is a sad shame when you think of your experience alone. Then you consider the numbers of people that went through Straight Incorporated, whether they graduated or just crossed the threshold of the place, you know.
Yeah.
They're affected. And they have spouses, they have loved ones, they have brothers and sisters, children wondering what the hell, you know.
And because so many have been married and married again and married and divorced and married and divorced and can't keep a marriage, can't keep a job.
Yeah.
Because straight, because of what it did to them. So Jimmy died. And that was, let's see, what year was that? I think somewhere around 2002. And I was pregnant, and I had a miscarriage a month later. And I was like, good, fine, I'm done. I'm relieved. I didn't like feeling pregnant. That was probably the worst morning sickness I'd had with that pregnancy. That one was a blighted ovum. If you don't, that means there's an egg.
No, I don't.
Egg and sperm unite, attached to the uterine wall, and nothing's in there growing. There's no baby. There's just that your body says you're pregnant, but there's no baby inside the egg. And you can go months with that. So, but with me, with my pregnancies, every time I'm pregnant, the doctor has me come in fairly early, like 6 weeks, to see how many there are, because women who have triplets have triplets. So every time we have to see how many
I
I'm
did not
having.
know that.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
random fact of nature. So
I'm going to write that down.
yeah, I think the same for some women who have twins. They have twins. Yeah, somewhere in the 1800s, there was an Italian woman who had 15 sets of triplets. I don't know how many lived, but
Oh, what causes it?
yeah, and it's like 1 in 200,000 to get pregnant naturally with triplets. Um, so life goes on. Rich, tribute to Jimmy, Rich began doing music. Rich was a talented musical person. He could sing, he could play guitar. He didn't really play piano, but you give him a tone and he could figure it out, one of those type people. So he decided, well, most bands don't have a bass player, so he went and bought a bass and learned bass. And he gets in a band with some awesome guys. And they're all like, Rich is pretty anal about things and about how it's done, and it's got to be very OCD. He was the one who packed the car, packed the equipment, because he knew how to do it and how to do it right.
Right. Right.
And in the midst of that, so then he started, decided to start promoting bands. So he's bluegrass. And sorry
I
guys,
remember him doing.
I can't. My brain is blanking on the band's names.
That's okay. We'll figure it out and write it down so people can listen.
I think one of the first ones we went to, some of the people around here will have these pig roast, and we'll go and everybody brings their instruments, and then you have these little groups of people playing and singing. And he got in this group with an entomology professor of mine, and so he joined their band, so they kind of decided then that weekend to create a Celtic band called Short Road Home. So he played on that one, and it was a really, really nice one, really great, beautiful music. And then his other buddies, their band, why is I can't come up with it.
It's okay.
Later.
It'll come back to you.
The bluegrass band, like one day they're playing a wedding on a stage in a yard, and the wind blows over his bass and breaks the neck. Luckily, he had another one, and I had to drive it out there to him. So I got to go on lots of that. And then he promoted bands. So he would promote bands to the Foundry, the Melting Point here in Athens, to the Georgia Theater. And then eventually he had one at the Classic Center. So the Avett Brothers, he promoted them. We had 40 people in this joint, from 40 people to sold out 2,000 people till they got too big for Athens. And their dad, the Avetts, their father is our connection, and he's a wonderful man. And now his kids are going through life, but they're beautiful people. I'm going off on some tangents.
So it's safe to say he was good at what he was doing. But what I'm curious about is most survivors that I've ever talked to have a certain charm about them. They have a certain way. I want to dance around the word charisma as much as possible, but we're very engaging, very intriguing, and people's first impressions are usually, they present pretty well. They're well-established, normal people. Would you kind of agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah, he was a wonderful guy. He was amenable, amiable, likable, loving, honest to a fault sometimes. So during this time, though, he's not working a real job. earning real
Yeah.
money. He is doing band stuff. It's starting to bring some money in, but sometimes he did it for free because he wants those pats on the back, and people are taking advantage of him, or just letting him do it and not even saying, we need to pay you. And somewhere in this midst, we're starting to figure out, I'm like, okay, is he, I'm like researching stuff. I'm trying to figure out I finally figure out he's got avoidant behavior. You know, he doesn't go on any family trips. My father takes us all on these trips, and he wouldn't go because my father went to West Point. He's a military man. Now, he's not one of these
Mhm.
domineering, he's a loving, beautiful man. But he is straightforward and practical. But I don't know, whatever reason that intimidated Rich. I'm like, okay, he's got avoidant behavior. People in authority. I'm like, does he have Epstein-Barr? Does he have chronic fatigue syndrome? I mean, he's always sleeping, or he's always depressed. And we finally start looking into, is he manic depressive? Is he bipolar? So we're going to go with that. And we start trying this medication. And oh my God, this is the traveling down the road through hell. It's like watching a sick Saturday Night Live skit. It was just like, this is sad, but funny, but not. It was just like, because he's pacing the room, talking, and just like, I couldn't even remember what he was going on about. And it's just like, this is this medicine doing this, and it's just not right. And it took 2 years trying to figure out the right medicine. You know, you got to try it for however long, and it was just horrendous. He didn't take care of himself.
Let me ask you this medication, were these behaviors, was he doing all the pacing and the pressured speech and the tangential conversations during all the medications, or just the one?
Just the one.
Okay.
For that 2 years while we were trying to figure out.
Oh, okay. Okay, I understand.
But he didn't take care of himself. He didn't eat right. He didn't. He would go 4 days without sleeping. And maybe the medication had something to do with that later, definitely later. I mean, leading a horse to water, I could not make him drink. He got diverticulitis. He had his sigmoid colon removed. He was sick every 6 months. I'm in the hospital with him for something. And he's like, I'm sorry. I'm like, eat right. Quit eating this shit. Quit eating bread and pasta and carbs, and eat some veggies. And we thought, okay, he's got diarrhea, and we're trying to figure out what is it. And then all of a sudden he's like, can you flush the toilet? I couldn't. I just had to get back in bed. And he is white and clammy and sweaty. And I look in the toilet and it's black. And I did not know what that meant. I called the doctor. I'm like, he's got diarrhea and blah, blah, blah. The doctor's like, oh, okay. And then I said, it's black. He said, oh, go to the emergency room now. That's blood. I'm like, oh. And he had thrown up the coffee ground throw up earlier that day. And I thought we had some, I got him to eat broccoli with French dip. So it was yellow. It was that French dip color and orangey yellow with what looked like broccoli flowerets, but it was the coffee grounds. They saved his life. This is around 2005. And he had an ulcer on the third order artery, which is, about the size of your pinky, just pumping blood into his intestines, into his stomach. And they went in this way and cauterized, they went in that way, and they cauterized it and did everything they could to shut it down. It's still bleeding. He had lost 8 units of blood. It's July 4th. He was playing on stage that weekend downtown Athens at the Ath Fest. And it's
That's crazy.
And it was like that 2 days later, we're in the hospital for July 4th. And it's like that doctor saved his life. I asked him, can you do a celiac test? And that was negative. It took us 6 months from there to figure out he was lactose intolerant. He ate a bowl of cereal every night before bed. We ate Mexican with cheese on, so we stopped eating cheese. And the celiac stuff that the nurse practitioner said, there could be a spectrum. He doesn't register here, but he could be somewhere else in here. So we would try the different ones, and we had to go wheat free. I got rice pizzas and soy cheese.
I wanted to ask you this because earlier you were talking about the malnutrition, the peanut butter sandwiches. We used to call them swimmers because they were peanut butter sandwiches, real thin, frozen. Yeah, and they thaw it out, and then they served them to us in a little 3-ounce and with a 3-ounce Dixie cup of milk with some ice. What my question, just as a biologist, I was wondering your opinion that malnutrition. Do you think that played a part into the celiac disease, or to other issues that we see other survivors having today?
Yeah, because it's all. Oh, there's so many theories, but the brain-gut connection, or the stress and the hormones that your body's having to create just to sustain your everyday living. Like your that said, hey, we got to pay rent every day. That turmoil is set in your gut. And it's just, that's where or for him, that's where it wreaked havoc, was his gut. I'm sure it wreaks havoc in different people in different places according to your chemistry. He was also a redhead, so I also call it redhead syndrome. Because redheads do have a lot of the same issues.
My personal health ended up with the heart attack and the open heart surgery, followed up with a stroke. Other people have tremendous problems in their neck, their shoulders, back.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with the ACEs study?
ACEs?
Uh-huh.
Which one? There
ACEs,
might be.
It's basically a trauma question.
For children, yeah. I just learned about that weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because it shows that physical history of what happens to us physiologically as we age. I won't say mature, but as we age, the study gives a real good picture of what a survivor has to look forward to, unfortunately.
Yeah. I just found out about it 2 weeks ago. I haven't read it yet.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead. So, but the celiac disease, and this, how'd that get cleared up?
So we stopped eating wheat. Or we tried to stop eating wheat. We tried to stop drinking milk products. We found what he could eat, basically. Cashews were good. Rice pizzas, rice products were great. Rice was the new starch, and vegetables, but he'd still eat crap. I was damned if I do, damned if I don't, as far as food went. If I was at a drive-through, hey, we're getting something, you want something? No. Get home, where's my food? Or I went through a drive-through, I didn't get anything because he always says no. I get home, he's like, you didn't get anything for me? But we'll get into that later. So we finally figure out lactose primarily. We started with that, and then we started with the bread stuff. We finally realized he's not bipolar, even though everything sounds just like bipolar. Spending money, that he doesn't have. Manic, depressive, up for days, sleeping for days. I'm like, he needs just enough medication to get him out of that depression, to keep him on a even keel, that he can actually function. He stayed in the bedroom 2 years, would not come out of the bedroom, would not come out of the house, wouldn't go in the kitchen. So around 2008 was like the last real job he had. So then, and that's when the economy started to tank. He was working for a company down in Miami then, and he wrote incredible stuff. He could write specs, he could write brochures for the company's products. He could write stories. I mean, everybody on Facebook knows, all his friends know the things he could come up with. His humor, Krogering,
The Kroger.
the Kroger picks. I'm like, I'm gonna make an album. I kept talking about, I gotta make an album. But so he had no job. And I guess that's when he started, that's when we came on the Facebook, and we're, more on the internet now. And he starts Googling his name, and he found Fornets. And he sees his name all over Fornets. And he sees people trashing him, and he sees people defending him. And he's like, and he is on that thing day and night, talking to people. Wow, this whole world opens up. He wakes up. He wakes up to what was done to him and straight. He sees how it ruined him. He sees how it's ruined everybody. And he finds Chris's post asking for an apology letter. And
Yeah.
he starts writing. He wrote all night long. New Year's Eve, 2008. He sent it to her, and she posted it the next day on New Year's 2009.
I remember.
And we start reading these stories from people and what's happened to them. And he told her, let people contact me through you. He talked to somebody every single day for an entire year. Every day for an entire year. If he's on the phone, I knew what it was. And it was just astounding. And people who hated his guts, he became friends with. He let them in, and they let him in, and he showed his concern and compassion and care, and a lot of people were like, hey, you can't write this. You were one of us. You were there. You went through all this too. For those who knew him, yeah, but for those who didn't, those who were there in Cincinnati and Atlanta only saw him as that role that he had to play, or that he was taught to play. For them, it changed their lives. It acknowledged what happened to them. It gave them freedom. It gave them a new life, new perspective, maybe some hope.
For so many survivors, Marion, what that did was gave us such a sense of simple validation.
Validation, yeah.
That is such an incredible thing, for a survivor. And of course, what that meant to us. And
Yeah. And we talked about it. I said, look, hey, if this is what God wants us to do this year, if you don't have a job and this is why, if this is going to bring healing to people, amen, do it. It's got to happen. People need to be healed. People need to awaken to what was done to them, to see the atrocities that happen, and for something to be done about it, that this doesn't happen to anyone else. It's a good thing.
For a year. For a year. And he was talking with people that hated him, or saw him as that guy that really could sing.
Yeah. Or yeah, the guy that gave a respite. Well, no, he was one of the good ones. You know, we got that a lot. He was one of the good ones. He was the nice guy.
Yeah.
He was he was a product of the machine.
You know that he was not anyone I ever knew. I was in a long time before he was. And I remember when that apology came out, my spidey senses immediately went off, you know, and I was suspicious. And I was one of those that questioned. I raked him over the coals. I'm not proud of that necessarily, but what I was able to do was, like I said before, I was able to watch Rich and then look at that apology, and it's like, this guy's matching his words pretty well. And I'm seeing friends that are near and dear to me, other survivors, that are welcoming, as you said, into their hearts. And I was watching a beautiful thing unfold. And I really began to admire him, you know. But for the both of you to sit down and to make this conscious decision to reach out to other survivors had to take a toll.
Well, it was almost our whole life. It was like I was a single parent. So it didn't faze me. It was good. It was important. And he needed to do it for whatever reason. And it was good.
How do you think would you describe it that he felt obsessed in talking with us? Do you feel that perhaps do you think he felt successful in making amends for what he, because I get the impression, you know, he was struggling a lot with some guilt.
Yeah.
Did that bring him any comfort at all?
Yeah, I think so. It just came naturally.
Yeah.
And he was good at it. And
what began to happen, I know that there was a feeling of separation. You know, like you said, you felt like a single mother. So there may be a sense of separation there, but
well, not necessarily because of that.
No.
Not because of reaching out to straight people and talking to them.
Okay.
That is a product of just what straight did to him.
Okay. What began to happen after that?
Well, I think somewhere in there I was going to say, so we finally figured out it wasn't bipolar, it was PTSD.
That's right, you did say that.
We figured out it wasn't bipolar, it was PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And if y'all don't know the difference, post traumatic disorder is just when something happens. You were in a car wreck, a plane crash, you got raped. One instance, boom, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is when something happens to you over and over and over again. You're raped repeatedly. You are captured and kidnapped in someone's basement for however long, or you're in straight for years at a time, being tortured and then torturing others for years at a time. Seeing the most evil acts of humans carried out on others and seeing them helpless to do a thing, and you being helpless to do a thing to help them. So we switch meds, and we get meds that work and meds that are helpful and better. I got, and this is about when, so this is somewhere around 2000, maybe that same year, 2009, 10. I went and got certified as a grief recovery specialist, and I found out a lady there, her husband had PTSD, and she told me what they did. She said, well, you're at the University of Georgia, you can go there for free or for minimal. So we did that, and he started going to therapy at UGA, and he went for 18 months, I don't know, 2 to 3 years it felt like. And
Did you go on like a weekly basis or?
Twice a week.
Oh, okay.
5 different modalities, everything they had. Dear Man, learning how to express what you've got to say. Exposure therapy, going through with something that's hard for you to do, making it happen, doing it, making it work, getting used to it so you can overcome it. I don't know all the others, but 5 different treatment modalities. He kept a notebook. He kept recording. She had him record the meetings, go home, listen to them, write down whatever came. And then, so one day a week, I think, was talking. One day a week was more like exposure and writing, and he has 3, 2, I can't remember, big notebooks. We're trying to find the other one. We found one. Chris has it. And he sent copies of it to somebody, I think. I'm trying to find the other one, just to see if any of that's helpful for whomever. But and somewhere in all of this, I got to where I was hitting myself. I couldn't. I sat in front of a TV for a year. I finally got myself on some medication again, or something. Yeah, let's see. 2006, we have another child. So these things are overlapping now, and when I told him I was pregnant, we were really happy, but we had no insurance because I just left a job, like the job, because he wasn't working for the past 3 or 4 years. This was a little redhead, looked like him, looked like the girls, the triplets were redheads. I don't want to ruin y'all's image of Rich, but you know what? Straight ruined him too. And as good as he could be, he couldn't help the things he did because Straight fucked him up. I was a single mom raising 3 boys. He was my 3rd boy. He didn't help me. He couldn't handle a screaming child. Screaming baby. Couldn't feed a baby vegetables because that made them scream. You have to feed them the shit they like, because that'll shut them up and keep them quiet. You can't argue with your mom. Because I'll come after you. My poor child is in the corner of his bedroom in terror at his father, telling him, "You're lying, you're faking it." Where did he learn that? Straight. He's treating our child like a straightling. And it's like, oh my God. And he doesn't talk to me about it. He doesn't anguish with me about it. I found out later he called his sister and told her, "I just did this to my son." He shoved him, our oldest, 3 times that I know of. Or I knew of 2. He told me there were 3. Shoved him by his collar up against the wall, off the floor, yelling at him about something maybe he had done to me or however he treated me. He was starting to get that way with Jimmy. Like I said, I was damned if I do, damned if I don't. He just yelled at me.
I've always kind of said, and I hope by saying, looking back now, I hope I wasn't trivializing it when I said, you know, survivors are not a walk in the park.
You were taught, you were trained how to treat people during the most influential age of your life. Your prime teenage social years were taken away from you, and you were treated inhumanely, and that's all you know. And like you said, I don't know the science behind what it does to your brain and your amygdala, and it shrinks, and all you live with is fight or flight. And because you were fighting and flighting, that's all you knew how to do. Just, you had to survive. You were in there day and night for years. And what it does to a person, you can't help. And sometimes you just react, and you can't help it. And he knew that, and he hated it. And
yes, Marion, I hate it too. I'm not different at all from Rich. Different time periods, different shithole, but you know, the same thing that you talk about, I've heard from my wife, you know, and I know other survivors, I've heard it from other survivor spouses, the same thing.
And yeah, so the people I have talked to from straight know this and get it. There's some who blame me. You know, they can blame me. They didn't live in my shoes. Paul began standing up for me and getting between us. And I was so afraid that Paul was going to hurt him, and then Paul's life would be ruined. Paul called him a pussy one day. Please forgive me, I'm using names. And Rich yells at me, "You're letting our child call me a pussy?" And I'm like, one day Paul's next to him and he's yelling at me and he's like, "You go away," whatever. Paul's like, "No, this is about me. That's my mother and you're my father." And I just said, "Just go get in the car. Please just go get in the car." And I said, "Go get Jimmy." And they went and got in the car. And we left. I can't remember which came first, but I called the cops we met them at the grocery store, and I told them what happened, and they says, well, there's nothing we can do. You know, nothing's occurred. Yeah. So I asked the boys, I said, do y'all want to go home and let it blow over like we always do? Or do y'all want to go to mom and daddy's, grandparents? And they said they wanted to go to mom and daddy's. I was like, oh. Oh. Oh my God. What have I been subjecting my kids to? What hell have they been living in? And that woke me up. And I don't know how much longer from there, but I think I'd gone through 2 years of thinking, should I leave him? My mom tried to get me to leave him years ago. I'm like, no, I'm a Christian. Christians don't get divorced. Yeah. And it's like, I finally came to the decision that I had to leave. I couldn't do this anymore. I was a zombie. I guess it was like April of 2015. I finally got up the guts and I said, I can't live with you anymore. And at first he was shocked, and then he understood. He knew. He said, you want to be free? He knows. He knew how he acted. He knew. He got it. He didn't want it to happen, of course. None of us do. We want everything to be good and whole and perfect. But when you've been damaged to that extent, what can you do? He had also started abusing his medications. He'd have a week and a half of time before he could get his medications refilled because he had taken them all. And he'd have to wait and suffer. And he was out of it, fucked up. I might run to the store. I tell Paul, please watch him. Let me know. Call me if I need to come home or sooner. He'd tell people he'd do things musically or this or that. He didn't. He couldn't. He was done. He wasn't following through on things. I have talks like, I need you to be the father. I need you to help me. I can't do all this. I can't do your laundry. The machine is 8 feet that way. You can do your own laundry. Just anything to help. Take the kids to school. Bathe them. Feed them something. Nothing. My minister said to give him a week and tell him to go into a drug rehab program. It's like, I could not do that to him. I said, no. He doesn't need to go to drug rehab. He's already been there. We don't need any more of that. And he got an apartment and he moved out. And our divorce could have been over quickly and easily because he understood. In one place of his brain, he understood. In the other, I thought, well, maybe this will make him get off his feet. This will make him get off his butt and do what he has to do. Because Paul was 14. He was old enough to say, no, I'm not going to daddy's. Jimmy had to, and he didn't want to. But then after a while, Jimmy's like, I want to go to daddy's. And that's fine. I was like, whatever. That was fine. I did not want to take his kids from him. If they wanted to be there, they could be there. Um, Jimmy ate pizza and burritos and root beer and ice cream and went. Then I go and fuck things up on my end because I started dating again. At one point, Rich even said he'd babysit for me, but that was not good. Apparently went out with the wrong person, and he found out who this person was a pedophile or something, and freaked that Jimmy was gonna get hurt. And with PTSD, that's one of those things that triggers is the welfare of a child. And I think I only went out with that person about a few times within 3 weeks, but that just flipped that switch. That was all he talked about. I just tried to live my life. I had to do no contact for a little while, use an app, whatever. But he was always complaining about money and that costs money. It's like, well, yeah, sorry. So, but he would text me over the most inane things and yell at me and scream at me, and every text was a barrage of hate. The other things I didn't mention throughout those last, especially years, were, belittling, demeaning, not supporting, not caring for what I was interested in or wanted to do. Hate emails to everybody. It is what it is. It was what it was. Some of it might have been true. Some of it might have not been true. We finally were at a point where everything was settled with the paperwork on the divorce and waiting on the judge's signature, and his lawyer let him know that he needed to be paid in full before he would let the judge sign the paperwork. And that was a straw that broke the camel's back. I got a text. I was at lunch with some coworkers, got back. I'm like, now what is he? My cortisol levels are through the roof. And I start reading it, and I'm like, oh my God, this is a suicide note. And I finished reading it, and I'm walking toward the office, and I'm calling 911, and I start reading them the note. I'm like, okay, they're sending someone there and someone to me. He called 911 so I wouldn't have to find him, he said in his note. He said, y'all are better off without me. I'm getting worse. I think he had quit taking his meds again or taking too many and didn't have any. I don't know. And I called my minister, and he says, I already heard, because one of our members was a detective. He says, I'm coming to get you. I call the schools, and I go pick up, or no, Jimmy, we waited for the bus, and Paul come home. He's driving. Except Rich wouldn't allow for him to get his license, and I got it, and he was going to have it revoked because he didn't agree. I don't know where that came from. It wasn't his. So, well, they gave him a license. He's a smart kid. So my minister was with me there when the kids were home, and we waited for, everybody to be home together. And I told them that Rich committed suicide. And Jimmy just screamed and ran to his room. And Paul just sat there. We had already moved. We had just found a house to buy. And we were in a rental house. Sold the house we were in. My parents owned it. I wanted to make sure and wait for all the straight community to be able to come. I wanted to give at least 2 weeks to give time that everybody who wanted to come could get there. And then Kim Muehlbauer had a gathering at her house for those who couldn't drive down. And there were over 300 people at the funeral. It was a tremendous blessing that all his friends could come. They were the ones who could, We had a receiving line. We did a video. We weren't officially divorced yet, so I got to have the funeral. If we had actually been divorced, I probably would not have been allowed to go, because I was not allowed to go to his father's funeral, which was the year before.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah. Tell you what, why don't we take a break, go eat some chocolate, and we'll resume in a few minutes. What do you think? All right, we'll do that.